and welcome to Masking for It, the podcast with a purpose, combining clinical insight with lived experience. Join us as we explore the realities of high-masking neurodivergent adults, debunk myths around autism and ADHD, and challenge outdated and harmful systems as we discuss the ways we can help neurodivergent people not just survive, but thrive. We're here so that the hidden can feel seen, the confused can find clarity, and the future can be different, because it needs to be. You can help us massively by following or subscribing, and in return, we can continue to bring you along behind the scenes with expert guests, pioneering research, and the chance to say you were a part of the change that we're creating. So, let's do this.
Hi there, we are back, and we are really looking forward to today, the final episode of our first series. And I think it ties up pretty well actually with what Wes Streeting has brought up for everybody lately, in that there's obviously been a lot of conversation around overdiagnosis. If you've been listening to our pod so far, you'll probably know where we sit on that argument. But I think, rather than just wish he hadn't gone there and being outraged, I think it's a really, really good point. And it brings up everything we've been speaking about, why we've been speaking about it, the level of misunderstanding that's still going on, but raising the point that there is a big issue here. So whilst we're coming at it from different sides, I think it's good it's created the conversation. So we're going to go into that today a bit and speak about what Leslie and Gail see professionally, how my experience says otherwise to overdiagnosis, and how many we're actually missing, and just see what other topics this brings up for us today. So Leslie, Gail, how is everything going? How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah. Got a snoring dog here, so I don't know if you can hear like a little noise, but if you can, it's the dog, not me. Just thought I'd let you know.
Always blame the dog, Leslie.
And you look like you might be somewhere different, Alexandra.
I am at the minute. I don't know how much you can or can't see behind, but I am in beautiful Atlanta, Georgia. And it's really, really stunning. I feel like I'm in a tree house where we are. We're in a beautiful lakeside property, and it's just so lovely. So yeah, bit jet lagged. Please bear with me. But yeah, really, really nice to have a change of scenery. It's been a hell of a year. So yeah, it's good to get away. But yes, a little bit of a different background for everybody. But I think I like this one. It's a bit more natural.
Means we're international.
We are international, absolutely. Here across the pond.
Wonderful.
So if anybody hasn't heard, obviously Wes Streeting is ordering an investigation into why the levels of autism and ADHD diagnosis are soaring, and trying to tackle overdiagnosis, which is what he deems the issue to be. What's your reaction to that, Gail?
I think my initial reaction was just like, oh no, we're not going there, are we? We're not kind of investing time and money in this argument that seems to just have been really ignited in America around RFK and his theories around autism and neurodivergence more broadly. And yeah, just that kind of anger, I suppose, initially around it. But I think kind of as you start to contemplate it and think about it a bit more, it does kind of give an opportunity, doesn't it, to look at the whole system and where we're at with diagnosis, and actually if this can be used, I think in a similar way to the SEND reforms, if it can be used as a way of improving things for people and making things better, then it isn't actually a bad thing. I think it's just the narrative of overdiagnosis that it sticks in your mind and seems to reinforce that false narrative around what's happening. But I hope that it isn't, the conclusion isn't already being drawn, that actually people are going into it with an open mind and thinking about what could look different and how that could be different.
Yeah. Leslie, how's it made you feel, and how does it compare with what you're seeing in clinic?
I think for me, what stands out is my question for Wes Street in Wes, if you want to ring Les, we can have a chat. We can have, a massive difference between adult and child rates. Surely something doesn't happen when you hit 18 and you become less likely to be autistic or have ADHD. The rates for adults who are diagnosed are a lot lower than what you would expect, given the actual prevalence of children. So they are obviously underdiagnosing adults or under aware of whether adults are neurodivergent, and I think that gets more obvious as people get older. But I suppose it's unclear whether he's talking about in general in the world are people being overdiagnosed, or we're looking at the UK in comparison to other countries, because our rates are pretty typical compared to other Western countries in Europe and the US. So I'm not really sure whether he's referring to our own country or in general, but it's the World Health Organization's talking about prevalence, and apparently West Streeting's way more important than the World Health Organization. It's just really arrogant. That's what makes me so cross, because it doesn't understand. And I think as Gail said, it's highlighting the issue, but for totally the wrong reasons. And I think that goes across the board, that people when they hear, or not necessarily people, but services, public services, when we've got this kind of tidal wave allegedly of people coming for assessment, that it's panic. People panic. And I think it goes back to what we've said many, many weeks ago, is that it has to change. The system isn't working, and there are people queuing for assessments, waiting years for assessments. I think our local area currently, I found out from my niece recently that our local area, the current wait is 6 years for ADHD assessment. And I don't know whether that's, my niece has already been waiting 2. And I don't know whether that's then 6 on top or 6 in total, but they've just shut down the service. So I don't really know what's going to happen to people, because everywhere's putting the shutters down and stopping assessment. So we get a lot more people coming to us for private assessments, which isn't really ideal, because not everyone can do that, can they?
Yeah, but I think there's also that narrative, isn't it, that somehow because you're working privately and you're charging people for assessments, that you're just saying yes to everybody because they're paying you to say yes. And I think it really annoys me that that's an accepted narrative, that we're somehow mercenaries and we're just doing it for the cash. And it, there's no understanding, or doesn't seem to be any understanding, that we adhere to professional standards. There's an expectation. We're registered with a regulator. We have to maintain our CPD. There's clear guidance from NICE around what assessments need to look like and what they should involve. And we adhere to all of that. And yet there's still questions about the validity of what we're doing and our intentions and what we're trying to do. And I think that kind of overdiagnosis narrative also it bleeds into that as well, that the NHS can't cope, so the private sector's taken over, but they're only doing it to make the money. It's not because they're trying to help people or give people answers or help them improve their lives. So and I think again, kind of, I don't want to keep harping back to the SEND system, but part of the problem with the SEND system as it is that the law as it stands isn't being applied, and nobody's being held accountable for delivering on what EHCP say or whatever. And I think the same happens with Diagnosis, that nobody's being held account. So there are rogue traders out there and rogue practitioners that are doing assessments and they're not doing them to the right standard. and they're not maintaining the professional standards that they're expected to, but they're not being held to account by anybody, and they're being commissioned by NHS services to deliver those services. We see reports that, aren't of a standard, but who's holding them to account? Well, it doesn't seem like anybody is. And anyway, I get my soapbox on that one.
It's a bit like, I suppose it's okay to blame, apparently. We blame the young people for being too neurodivergent and daring to mention that they might need acknowledgement. We're blaming behaviour. We're blaming all of the private diagnostic services for saying too many people are neurodivergent. We're not really looking at the issue, which is that there are loads of neurodivergent people in the world. And I think, Alexandra, you have a quote from somebody who I cannot remember the name of.
Dr. Jen Walkin. Yeah, she's fantastic, and she put it perfectly and shone a light on the question being, why there's so many neurodivergent people all of a sudden. The same reason there were so many more stars when we found telescopes. It's what lens you're seeing things through, what information, what technology you have at your disposal affects what you're able to seek, what you're able to find and discover. And it's really, really difficult. As you've both mentioned, you've got two narratives, one in the States of, I didn't take a paracetamol and I've got to blame my mum if she did when she was pregnant with me. And then one over here of, actually, it's problematic, it's all costing too much. But it's two people wanting to swoop in and be the heroes to find the answer to what's going on and put some blame somewhere. And it entirely misses the mark. It's the most unintelligent, ignorant, shallow misunderstanding in history of psychology, surely, because these are human beings as well, that I think it's very much spoken about as numbers and statistics and all this. We're human beings. And there are loads of us. There are more than are recorded. There is a huge underdiagnosis problem. And Ellie Middleton already put it fantastically, saying instead of asking why are all of these neurodivergent people popping up, the government should be asking themselves, how have we missed all of these people for so long and let them down? And that is the question that needs asking. That is the money should be being put in, because the reason why we've started this and a huge part of our book is looking at what have the signs been throughout history that have indicated the presence of neurodivergent people. So as society's changed, the prevalence has changed, because we were speaking earlier about generational differences, and there's that especially British stiff upper lip and things like that. But I think if you couldn't conform, then you were pretty much cast out on the streets or in a mental institution. It was all shaped very differently. Now it's not that brutal, but people are still saying, actually, I can't cope with these things we're meant to be doing. And now you might not hopefully be institutionalized for it. Some are, dreadfully. But, we're still being silent so far as, well, no, we don't want to give you a diagnosis because there's too many of you asking for them. And you're all just being too weak, actually. Life's never been so easy. You should be getting on with it. And I just think while society changes around us, what we're trying to prove and what we're researching is that the innate human parts of neurodivergent people haven't changed and aren't going anywhere. They're just going through different things as our environments become different around us. So I also think there's a hugely accurate description would be to compare it to the left-handed scenario, which we've already mentioned, of, as soon as it became less demonized to be left-handed, more people were able to come out and say, actually, I am left-handed, I do function better this way, because they weren't scared of being outcast for it. And then suddenly more existed. That's not true. They were always there. They just weren't allowed to be.
You can see the graphs of left-handedness going up from the 1930s onwards, right up all the way through to the 70s. And it's really clear that that trajectory is what we're talking about with neurodivergence in terms of autism and ADHD, isn't it? That same,
black and white to see.
Look at all these people, where are they all coming from?
Yeah. And I think if you then compare that with what's going on at the moment and what the conversations are looking like at the moment, it's as though left-handed people would have to go through a diagnosis like we have to for autism and ADHD. Well, if you made that happen, if they had said, well, no, you need to wait for diagnosis until you're allowed to use your left hand, or you're allowed to use scissors for left-handed people instead, there would be a massive issue. That would be draining money. That would be holding people up from living their lives easily when there's no reason that they can't, because the accommodations are there. They know how they need to function. They're just not allowed to yet, or the systems don't provide for that yet. If you cross that over and say, actually, okay, Wes, we agree, the diagnosis system isn't working at the minute. You shouldn't have to jump through the hoop or pay for diagnosis. Yes, there needs to be a responsibility because it's more complex than being left-handed. But what we can start doing already is, in the comparison, putting the box out with the left-handed scissors there for people and letting them use their left hand instead. So there are so many things already that we can be doing that will mean it's not as much of a life or death, frankly, sometimes situation for people to become diagnosed. And you could take the strain off the waiting list. You could take the strain off the finances in counties or on families who are having to go private because it's destroying them personally and as a unit. You can take the strain off if you take the requirements away and listen to what neurodivergent people are saying, listen to what clinicians are saying, that they're seeing and what's needed, because the system doesn't work at the minute. And I think that's the one thing both sides do agree on, but they need to be consulting with each other about, okay, what can we do so that we're taking pressure away, but people are able to function and keep up their well-being or improve their well-being. We know so much better now.
Yeah, and ultimately, because part of this conversation has been prompted, hasn't it, by the rising welfare bill and wanting to cut the welfare bill. And it's like, well, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? If you help people to understand what their identity is and how they best function, then they are going to be able to work, and they're not going to be dependent on the state, and they're not going to need to access mental health services, because actually you've provided that information to them at an early stage, and they haven't got to the point of burnout, and they're not traumatized by having been in a school setting that has really kind of been a massive struggle for them. So it's not the diagnosis that is causing the welfare issue, is it? It's the way people have been treated, the way that schools and society isn't set up for neurodivergence. And it certainly feels from my experience that schools are going, particularly mainstream schools, are going further and further down a rabbit hole of absolute conformity, which is having a massive impact, not just on neurodivergent young people, but on young people's mental health. And as a society, we can't keep existing like that, can we? I don't think.
And the agenda is to get all of these missing children back into school, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And our local school especially has actually gone on strike for 2 days last week, 3 days this week, over the children's behaviour. Now, knowing some people locally and their children and hearing some of their stories, especially some that, are going through assessment for ADHD, things like that, the picture that was in the newspaper literally had a member of staff holding a tabard saying behavioural solutions for all. Now, both of you can explain in a moment for me, please, what the problem with that is. But it's along the lines of what you just said, Gail, of it's conformity, and getting harsher and narrower on them. Now, I know that there have also been instances in this school where there have been things that have helped the children, either with or without additional needs. And sometimes they haven't been willing, in conversations with the parents, to agree to help and collaborate with the family or with the child to facilitate things that have helped the child. So I know being on report, for example, can be really helpful for neurodivergent children. Yes, it's technically a punishment, but actually it's a few times I've seen it, and even on Educating Yorkshire, I believe it came up, was actually the kid knew where it was at because it knew what it was doing well and it knew what it wasn't doing so well. And, you know, I know they come home and be able to say, Mum, look, I got this because I did this really well. And, you know, they have so much more reassurance, and it took away the emotional burden of not knowing whether you're behaving right or not. It just took away the guesswork that so many neurodivergent people go through and causes so much dysregulation for them. And yet the schools are not willing to continue having the child on report because that's not done. So you think, okay, whether something's done or not, is it helping that child that you want the behaviour to improve with? You're seeing their behaviours improving with that, yet you're saying you're not willing to continue doing that for them because that's not done. And the very week after, that kid's in detention. And then you're striking over their behaviour that you literally had the opportunity in front of you to be doing something that was helping them. So what are we doing? What are we doing instead of just using common sense and actual examples they're seeing playing out? It's not even theories that are being fed to them. Come on, try this. It's things they're seeing and experiencing, and they're still not willing to do that. And they're on strike now. I'm sorry, that doesn't work. So I think it's actually a really good opportunity to go through what is the difference between sort of behavioural consequences and working with a child. Why might something like a report, is there something we could do that's similar to that, that's going to help neurodivergent kids instead of behavioural solutions?
I suppose ultimately it all ends in mental health services. If we make mistakes in children's upbringing and support, schooling, I'm afraid the bill, it doesn't go to WES, it goes to possibly a different department, but it's all our taxes, isn't it, or government money, just a different department. I think there's a lot of, we'll throw it down, different departments. We'll just ignore the fact there's neurodivergence. We'll just wait till everyone gets mentally unwell at the end of it, and then we'll just pay for them to be in hospital or have community services to support mental health. But we'll still not mention why. And I think one of the things about behavioural theories is that, ultimately it's operant conditioning. That's what it's based on. So if everyone knows probably about Pavlov's dogs, and that's not operant conditioning, but the idea is that, if you show a dog a treat, they salivate, don't they? And then there's a kind of response there that's kind of automatic. So that's called classical conditioning, where something happens as a result of a stimulus. And operant conditioning is slightly different, and it was coined by Skinner. And the idea is that you can get someone to behave a certain way if you reward them for certain behaviours. And a lot of these theories have been developed on animals like pigeons and rats. We didn't have humans in little cages pecking at a button. And the idea is that if you peck at a button, if you're a pigeon, for example, if you do it in a certain way or at a certain time, you get a reward. And, if the best actual reward, the reinforcement schedule, is that if you get it not randomly, then you're going to do it more, because the idea is that you might get a reward for it. And I think, high schools in particular are probably the most inconsistent places in terms of how children are responded to. So you've got behaviours that are happening because people are getting rewards or punishments, and it's all based on observable behaviour. So we can say, well, the pigeon will do that if they get a reward. Let's do that for children. Let's do that for humans. And humans have got like whole extra bits to their brains that they've got language and understanding and logic that pigeons and rats don't have, as lovely as they are. It's, we're using theories that were based on animals to get children to behave, and that it's all based on conditioning. That's behaviour theory, the idea that you can get something for doing something, as if there's a choice. And I've heard it so many times being talked about, particularly in primary schools. You're going to make good choices today for those children that allegedly can't behave in the way that they're supposed to. And it's just ignoring the whole fact that we've got this part of our brain that responds in a way that it protects us. So our brains are just there to keep us safe and alive. And so our unconscious, subconscious brain is watchful, is vigilant for danger, because we've still not evolved from when we were nomadic tribes or living in caves, when we were hunting for our food, or we were being attacked by wild animals. And now we don't live like that. Well, it depends where you live, doesn't it? In some parts of the UK, I think probably maybe we do feel a little bit like there are tribes, but there's people probably out to get you or whatever. But generally we're fairly safe. We're safe-ish around Tesco. But we don't always. Our brains don't know that. Our brains don't know that it's time to evolve further. We're still behaving in a way that provides that dysregulation response keeps us safe. So we're watchful. We might go into fight or flight or freeze or fawn mode in the school when we're scared, dysregulated, overwhelmed. And all of those neurodivergent children that are scared and dysregulated and overwhelmed will behave in ways that are seen as needing to be modifiable. So it could be that they're being aggressive to a teacher, shouting or physically threatening, or it could be that they're under the table hiding, or they might be being exceptionally good and just everyone says, oh, what a good child that is. They really, really are just the perfect child, which is not usual either. So all of these anxiety responses are being displayed in school as behaviour, as if we're pigeons, when actually it's coming from a place of neurodivergence. Very often people responding in ways that are dysregulation or understanding of the world that, well, this teacher always shouts at me, or this teacher doesn't understand, or they talk too fast, or this room is too noisy, or there's just too many people in here, whatever it is that's going on. You can't choose whether to be dysregulated or not. You can't decide, well, I'm going to have a really good day today. I mean, if only we could all just decide we're not going to be anxious today, that would be really be great, wouldn't it? The medicines industry that providing all these medications for people who are anxious, they just say, oh, well, we don't need them because we're just going to say, I'm not going to be anxious today. Okay, that's fine. Make a good choice. But none of it's controllable. And I know there are certain ways to behave, but our anxiety responses, when they're so huge, that's what we're trying to control. And what we need to be doing is saying, well, why are children behaving like this? Why are they getting so anxious in the first place? Because they're being shouted at and they're scared and overwhelmed and often not able to go, or, dragged into school. Children are dragged into school against their will when they're really young and made to go in and lied to until they can leave if they want to. And I think we talked about this probably a few episodes in around, how animals behave when they're kept in captivity. And children are kept in captivity and they cannot get out. And I think that's one very different change that has happened in schools since I was at school, because we could just get out. Not that that was necessarily always the best thing, but we could get out, and we did.
I can't say how much that makes sense of my experience of being on the receiving end of that sort of treatment, and why it didn't work. It didn't not work because I thought, I'm not listening to you. There was no defiance. There was actually no defiance on my part. I wasn't choosing. I was so dysregulated that your punishment or reward meant nothing to
Exactly.
me.
Yeah.
It was so irrelevant. And that's not because I was disrespectful or any of the things it was taken as. I was in survival mode. And if I got a red sticker on the wall,
Yeah. Didn't change your
that,
survival status, did it?
it did nothing. But equally, to want to get a merit or something and be, oh, well, you can do this like, I'd do it if I could. I think that's
Yeah.
what people miss is
Yeah.
I'd be doing it if I could. It doesn't incentivize me having a green sticker on there because I want to be doing everything right. And if I'm
Yeah.
not doing something, it's probably because I'm not okay right now, or I can't, or I need something else. And I
Yeah. Or
think,
you might be phoning. You might actually be being really good to stay right under the radar. And that's effortful as well, because
yeah,
that's also not necessarily because you're learning. You
yeah,
might just be trying to phone so hard that you're not actually listening. You're just smiling and nodding. And I think a lot of children who phone don't get picked up because they're so good at doing that. They're going right under the radar. And that's their aim. That's the brain's aim, is to stay invisible. And I suppose there's something about people who are on report, is that being on report is a punishment, and you're meant to be ashamed of it, like you're on report. And what it does is, it gives you that guidance about what your behaviour is expected to be. But the reason why it's there is not very nice. And actually, we could all have that really good feedback, really clear feedback about how we've
feedback's so
done.
important for
Yeah,
neurodivergence. I have to say, you need to know all the time because we get so many things wrong when we don't mean to. Like, to have the reassurance of this was good because of this and this was bad because of that is so helpful, and it helps us know where we are with you. Um, it's just an immensely helpful, calming thing because we're not as defiant as everybody thinks all the time. And sorry, I interrupted you there, Leslie, but I just wanted to
that's
get across
fine.
how important feedback is for us. We need a lot of reassurance because, a lot of the time our best intentions are taken wrong. And that's really, really upsetting. I don't think you don't see that child when it's at home bawling its eyes out, breaking its heart because it didn't want to upset that other child, or it didn't mean to annoy the teacher. So it then shouted at them and
Mm.
gets vilified.
Well, that becomes
It's,
the narrative, doesn't it? That I'm
yeah,
a bad kid, I'm naughty, so I might as well be naughty again because whatever I do, it isn't right. And then when we get older and end up people in mental health services, that's where the money goes, because people have low self-esteem, they have addiction problems,
mhm,
they have issues around management of a job. And,
yeah,
we need feedback in jobs, don't we? People need feedback. We need feedback all through our lifespan. And I think one of the things that really, really kind of struck me recently was that I was in an older people's home, and the same is happening there with neurodivergent people about how to behave, and, people who need to pace, and
mm,
people who've always walked a lot throughout their lives continue to need that, possibly because they're neurodivergent. And those people with dementia who are doing all the things they used to do when they were younger, then they're causing problems in old people's homes. So are they all going to go on strike about the behaviour? Because, I
yeah,
mean, what other job is it acceptable to say, I'm going on strike because I don't like the people I work with?
no,
I mean, if you can't nurture children, you shouldn't be in a school, should you?
no. And
Because,
what message is that to the kids? I mean,
yeah,
unsurprisingly, I've heard of a good few of the children really not coping very well. And I think A, it's the end of the year, but B, the message of that is just horrific. But
yeah,
it's absolutely the point of this discussion is it's all of the consequences that build up on that. And it goes far beyond budgets for um, diagnosis and assessment and send. It goes
yeah,
into, as you
sure.
say, the mental health services generally, burnout, that
Mm,
mind body link of, when body says no. Look that up if you don't know
yeah,
already. And prison services, welfare
yeah,
services, it all feeds into all of those things. And that's why diagnosis cannot be reduced. Looking at these issues, we cannot deny understanding this issue better for the people themselves, but for society at large, because we're getting it very, very wrong, and it's costing us more.
It's cheaper to acknowledge it, isn't it, and prevent the problems than it is to leave it and ignore it and blame everybody. It's cheaper in a financial way, but also in a well-being
way. Imagine having happy people in society, functioning people, supported people in society. I think I loved the example you gave earlier, Gail.
Yeah, of in Monsters Inc., the film where at the start of the film, the monsters are scaring children in the middle of the night to generate electricity to power their world, and plot spoiler for anybody that's not seen it, by the end of the film they've realized that actually making children happy and making children laugh generate more power, and thinking about that in the context of like social media and rage bait and, you know, the anger that it generates in people, and actually can we not get to a place where we're generating happiness in people, and wouldn't that be a better world to live in, where we're powered by happiness and not anger and rage?
And I think that begins with understanding. And I think all of the conversations that are being had at the moment in Parliament just sound to me the biggest examples of misunderstanding. And I think, you know, everything's absolutely being driven through fear at the moment. And we do need to do a complete 360 like Monsters Inc. and go at it from completely the other way. Because, you know, Matt Hancock's suggestion to screen in schools, and then from day one, you're sort of, you know, starting on the right track with understanding, with the tools you need, the support you need. And there isn't this massive backlog and other services involved, and just, you know, perpetuation of something that doesn't need to be an issue. And obviously there's different levels of support needed for everybody. And there are going to be cases that don't fit into what we're talking about here. But actually, especially for those people who are on the fence about whether they even need a diagnosis or not, and all those things, that is what we want to talk to. We're not wanting to always address, you know, issues exactly like mine, or issues that are more extreme. We're wanting to go, what's in society? We know that there are definitely a lot more people, like you mentioned, the old people's homes. Actually, it's in the 90% of people over 60, I believe, are not diagnosed, but are neurodivergent. And the amount of generations where we're catching up with that we've missed for years, the answer to that isn't stop looking there, stop with this whole conversation. It's only just begun. We're only starting to understand. We can't close it down now. That's the opposite of what we need to do. But I think they don't understand that, you know, we don't want more and more and more. We just need some changes that will help everybody universally.
Yeah, recognise where the stars are and put support in, and all the practitioners that are around dealing with diagnosis at whatever age all need to be working in early years alongside the teaching staff and the people who are working in nurseries and schools, and working together to raise awareness and saying, yeah, this child looks like they might need this. And it's massively oversimplifying it to say it's like left-handedness. But as a basic premise, recognizing it early means that people can learn what they need as well. It's not about asking for everything. It's about knowing yourself and who you are, and not being told you're a naughty kid when you're not. And it's about then getting into adulthood with a sense of some pride in who you are, and in pride in your neurodivergence, and not different experiences throughout school of being told you're wrong, you're untidy, you're disruptive, you're cheeky, you're disrespectful, you're a bad person. And it's no different from the witches that we were talking about a couple of months ago. people being vilified in society and excluded and pointed at and told they're bad. It's no different from that.
But it's not only the it's not only the narrative from the adults as well to the children, is it? It's the narratives that then other children generate around their classmates and their peers, and they bring those narratives into their adult life, don't they? And it impacts on how they treat other people.
Yeah.
It would be really nice if we could actually get to a point where it's normalized. Being neurodivergent becomes quite normal because, it's you don't want to continue being different. The whole problem is it's so uncomfortable being different and needing this or that. If it all just existed and was there, that would be so much better for everybody, and everyone could just do things as they need. They could be productive, they could feel good about themselves, they can contribute. All of those things are good for everybody, and I think that's what it's about, and that's why it can't remain underdiagnosed, which it absolutely is.
And I think it also needs to be not medical and not held within the NHS, because the NHS can't cope. Not that it's bad, it just can't cope. And there's this kind of narrative that there's a load of cranks outside the NHS that are making it up. And actually, if you had a heart specialist in a Bupa hospital, for example, who discovered this amazing way of treating a heart difficulty, and everyone said, oh, they've invented a new valve or whatever. I know nothing about hearts, so totally making up words now. But imagine if there was a new treatment or technique that was learnt within a private independent hospital, and then everyone would be celebrating, saying, this is a really highly qualified heart specialist. They've been to medical school. They're a doctor of whatever. This is great. Let's roll it out because it's dead cheap. But when people who are highly qualified and who are experts in themselves as well, and so I'm talking about highly qualified neurodivergent people who know themselves, they don't often necessarily have a degree in it, but they're the most expert people. When they talk, or when clinicians and practitioners talk, somehow it's like, well, everyone's just talking rubbish. How do they get away with disrespecting people so much? Because if it was a physical health condition and a revelation happened, then we'd be welcoming it. And I think there's a lot of people and a lot of MPs actually who are talking a lot of sense and keep raising it in Parliament. I know the MP for Warrington South, for example, is a really keen advocate for neurodivergence, and she talks about it a lot in Parliament. There's a lot of people talking about it, and there's some really famous actors and actresses in the UK raising the issue as well. So,
no, it's quite perverse when you think about it, that it's questioned so much suddenly because you're a private practitioner, or suddenly, it's very strange. It's just as strange as, you're questioned, well, do you really have ADHD, or are you just wanting some attention? That, to me, I've never understood, because to me, I'd really love to have just not had all of the grief. And I think there's lots of people saying, but also for practitioners, it's completely perverse that I can only suppose, because people really don't understand this area, they have to put it down or write it off because it's something they can't comprehend. But is that an intelligent way for us to function as a society?
It's really not, is it?
If you don't understand and it troubles you, please learn, please speak to us. But the answer isn't to try and make something go away. So yeah,
it's very childlike, isn't it? You think about how toddlers don't want to hear something, and we have to go now because it's finished. The playtime's finished, or wherever you are, it's tea time, and they go no, 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 like that. It's really childlike to be behaving like that as a governmental department, to just pretend it's la 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 la, it's not there. Really,
it truly feels like that's where we're at. And we need to change that, don't we? And hopefully,
that's why we're here, isn't it?
Yes, hopefully some of what we've addressed today opens up that conversation and opens up some minds for people. And if anybody else has anything to add to the conversation, or would like to speak, this is exactly what we want to encourage, isn't it?
Yeah, we're starting to plan, aren't we? Season 2 of the pod, and getting some more guests on and deep diving into some more topics, aren't we? So it'd be great if people had anything they wanted to contribute or for us to focus on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and for season 1. It's very strange. That's done. We've done it.
Yeah,
Um,
season 1, but not the end of us.
Not the end. I think we feel like we've sort of set out our stall, perhaps, and next season, what we want to do is start really getting under the hood and getting into the details with everything, because we needed to do an introduction, we needed to do an overview, because it's such a complex topic and there's so much to sort of how we've come together and why. But I'm really excited for some of the people that we've got lined up to speak to and some of the topics that we'll be addressing. So thank you, West Streeting, for putting this on people's agenda. And let's see if we can try and do it a bit differently, maybe. But yeah, I think it's case in point for why we're here, and that so much needs to happen yet, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we have hope, don't we? That it's a bit like changing the law around being gay, isn't it? Just that it did happen. The law did change, and it's still not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. And we're not changing the law, but hopefully enough people gathering, we make change together. And if anyone does want to come on the pod and be interviewed by us, or just have a little chat away, please get in touch. And if you really enjoy listening, please share, because that's our next mission, isn't it? Is to grow a little bit. And, we'd be really appreciative if you would be able to share the pod for us.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Leslie and Gail, for being here with me as ever.
Thank you.
And I am really excited for what we're going to do next year. So let's go and find a mince pie and relax. So thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That is all for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you come back next time. Please follow or subscribe so that you don't miss a thing. And if you'd like even more of us, you can go over to www.maskingforit.com and find more episodes and blogs on our website, which get into some nitty-gritty detail, because we do love that. And you can also get in touch with us if there's something that we haven't covered, or you have any questions or something about your experience that you'd like to share. Then please send that to us via email. Is contact@maskingforit.com, or any of our socials, which are @maskingforitpodcast. We'd love to hear from you, and thank you so much for being here as we bring the conversation out to the real world to see if we can change it just that little bit. Thank you so much for being a part of it, and we'll see you next time.